Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Eric Hernandez, and you are listening to the Rabblecast. I believe this is 595. I don't always do the intro numbers in the beginning. I've noticed. Sometimes I'll do it, sometimes I don't. But I'll try to make it more consistent if it helps people out there. I don't know. We'll see what happens. On this episode, I talk about a few more streaming movies that I watched recently. More specifically, movies from last year, 2019. Because now, if for anybody else out there who is a father, whether it's one child or more, it's not easy getting out to the theaters, especially nowadays where we're all pretty much told to stay home. Movie theaters are not currently open, so I've taken to watching a lot of streaming videos, streaming movies, streaming TV shows to see what happens. And recently, I watched new movies to me that came out last year. Men in Black International, which I give a quick meh to. It was not quite the movie I was hoping it was going to be. And from there, I jump over to Brightburn from May 2019, from James Gunn, who's a producer, and the Gunn family. Let's see here. Brightburn is, I read it in the episode itself, so I'm just going to go right here. What if a child from another world crash landed on Earth, but instead of becoming a hero to mankind, he proved to be something far more sinister? That's the little summary off of the IMDb page. Elizabeth Banks plays Tori Breyer. David Denman plays Kyle Breyer. I got the name right this time. And Jackson Dunn plays the young Brandon Breyer. And I gotta say, again, I am not a fan of horror movies. I watched this because it involved a comic book idea of a bad Superman, and also from a project from James Gunn. So I figured, why not? Let's see what happens. I remember when this movie was being released. I remember hearing the hype about it going into Comic-Con. I talk about what happened with that hype leading into Comic-Con from last year, or the year before, I believe. And the slight controversy that happened between James Gunn, Disney, Mike Cernovich, Warner Brothers, and all that stuff. I felt this movie probably could have been a bigger hit if it was released at a different time. And I felt like this one kind of flew under the radar a little bit. But I talk all about all of that. I get into some of the story of the movie itself. I try not to spoil too much about it. So I guess if you're listening right now, this is your first spoiler warning. I try my best to do another one during the episode. But it's always into the episode itself. So again, if you have not seen it, be forewarned. We are brought to you by InsidePulse.com. You can find us under the podcast section. You can also find the show over at Rabblecast.libsyn.com. Make sure you check out our YouTube page, youtube.com/Rabblecast. Send us a tweet at Rabblecast. Email us, rabblecast@gmail.com. And as always, check out the Rabblecast Facebook fan page for different news, links, stories, whatever the case is. I'm trying to update some more stuff there, as always. It's not always easy for me. But I'm like, I might, share a story here, share a picture there, try to keep things going, keep the ball rolling, so to speak. So that's pretty much it. I'm going to let the episodes speak for itself. And that's it. Enjoy the show. Let's see. Where do I start? There really isn't much to tell right now because with everything going on, I really don't get out of the house that much. We're pretty much just at home right now, waiting for the arrival of kiddo number 2. And, I come home, Jen stays home with kiddo number 1, and goes through his school lessons, takes care of him, tries to relax because obviously she's carrying around another child in her belly. So we're just pretty much in a weird routine right now of I come home, we relax, we have dinner together, we watch a movie or some TV shows, and then from there it's just like rinse and repeat for the week. And then on the weekends, get ready to go out and get some more stuff. So I'll venture out for the time being. And I'll go to the grocery store just so we can have stuff for for the next, let's say, about week and a half. So we're safe and sound for the time being. So again, I'm not going to get into the whole day to day and what's going on as far as the crisis. Check out some news sites, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, whatever you like. I know everybody has their preference. I know the news is quite biased these days. So try to find a news source that will give you information that's not going to be, cheerleading for one side or the other. Just try to get the facts as best you can. I know it's not easy these days. And try to just go through all the BS and just get the straight facts for the time being. It's the ongoing thing of people saying, why are we focusing on the number of deaths and why aren't we focusing on recovery? Look, let's be safe. Let's be smart. And let's help one another. That's the best that I can say. That's the way I'm trying to approach things. The few friends that we talk to during the week, because everybody's, in their own rut or routine right now. We're just trying to help one another out. Recently, our dear friends, Pedro and Kelly, swung by real fast to drop off some masks that Kelly was nice enough to make. Kelly's been making masks for the local hospital, helping people out. Anybody else who's been asking, she's been at home taking care of her kids and also sewing like mad to make masks for everybody. So Kelly, if you're listening, I know you're listening, I hope the kids are asleep in the back seat, and I hope you're being safe. And thank you. It's really, really sweet what you did for us. And yeah, just try to help one another out right now, man. Really, that's what it comes down to. Somebody needs help. If you have a 3D printer, like we do, we've been trying to help people out. Jen had some plans that she found online where you can print out a mask. Another one of our friends, Holly, helped us out with that because the print size was too small for her printer, but they were able to work together with one another and get things done. So it's all a matter of helping people out and also checking in on friends just to make sure everything is going well. So I really can't talk about work because work is work. I'm not going to sit here and say I'm essential. I'm important to the workforce. Look, I'm important to my job. I'm also important to my family. So long as I can provide, I'm not going to complain. But I'm also not going to sit there and say that I'm important and I need to be at work. My family needs to eat. That's what's important. And right now, that's what I'm doing. I'm making sure by any means necessary that they're taken care of. And again, we're waiting for the arrival of the second child. So with that, I'm making sure that everything is taken care of as best I can to the best of my ability. So for that, again, home life and work life, there's really not much to talk about. Weirdly enough, for as much as I've been doing this show for 13 on 14 years now, I'm pretty open about most things. But it's odd because I'm kind of private about my personal life. I mean, I'll talk about certain events or certain things that happen, but I really don't feel the need to tell everybody about all the things that happen at home. I don't think anybody wants to really hear that. So I try to not bring that up unless it involves some kind of a story or some kind of a goof or gag, whatever the case is. Same thing with work. There's no real need to get into all the different things that I do that don't pertain to the show, because I don't find them, at least let's put it this way, I don't think the listeners, you, would find them as entertaining. Now, people who are closer friends, obviously we'll talk to them and see what's going on. I miss a bunch of you out there. If you're listening to, I can't wait. If you're listening to this, I can't wait to get back out and hang out with friends, whether it be dinner, small get-togethers, whatever the case is. I mean, phone calls and video calls are nice, but let's face it, I'm dying for some sushi. I know that's like, would that classify as a first world problem? I guess it would in a way. I just want to get out, have some fun, spend some time with people, and hopefully we can all do that in the very near future when things get back to some semblance of normality. So, with that, I will talk about something that I've been doing at home late nights, and that's usually watching movies, because I've 2019, I came to the realization that there was a lot of movies that I was not able to go out and watch in the theaters. So that means putting things off and hopefully that things would come on streaming or, rental, whatever the case is. Again, I really don't rent too much from iTunes or other services unless it's something that I'm dying to watch. Like I think Avengers Endgame, I broke before the actual streaming release of it, and I think I ended up renting it at one point. I think it was that or Infinity War. I can't remember which one. But I'm going through. I'm finding out which streaming services I have access to, thanks to our cable provider. Put in your username and password and get authorized, and then I'll just start looking through a bunch of things. Recently watched Men in Black International with Chris Hemsworth and Tessa Thompson. I gotta say, not impressed. I was hoping for a, what's the best way to put this? Reinvigorating energy into that franchise after the last 3 movies. First Men in Black movie was amazing. It was not, it was off the beaten path, something that you really weren't expecting. Directed by, I think, Barry Sonnenfeld, same director who did The Addams Family, the first 2 movies. And I was hoping that that same magic or that same influence would flow into the 4th installment of Men in Black. The second one was a little odd. They retreaded and retconned a few things. Third one was a prequel of sorts, and they played with the idea of the younger version of Tommy Lee Jones's character, played by Josh Brolin. And I was like, all right, let's see what Chris Hemsworth and Tessa Thompson could do. It was a weird storytelling, try to delve back into it, a different director. I mean, they played by more or less the same rules, but it just was not what I was expecting as far as that movie's concerned. I can now understand why a lot of the reviews on it, a lot of the fan takes on it, were just saying, hey, look, it was fun, but not as fun as we remember it to be. So I was like, all right, whatever. I'm looking for other things. As I was scrolling through, I found another movie that I got really, really interested in because it was mired by controversy. Not the movie itself, but by a certain individual that was involved. And that was the movie Brightburn. Brightburn is listed as a drama, horror, mystery, and sci-fi movie off of IMDb. It was something that I really, really wanted to watch for some time. And that was because it spun an old mythology around a little bit and gave you like the dark side of it. So I'll just read the summary off of IMDb here. What if a child from another world crash landed on Earth, but instead of becoming a hero to mankind, he proved to be something far more sinister? Essentially what this plays with is the idea of Superman. What if Superman fell in Smallville or, down to Kansas? Apparently Brightburn is actually situated in Kansas from what this says in the movie. I'm not familiar with Kansas itself, so I really couldn't tell you. But Smallville is also in Kansas, the way they wrote it. When Ma and Pa Kent found a little baby with a blanket in a space pod, they took that baby home and raised it, took care of it, taught it right from wrong, and it grew up to be Clark Kent on this world, or Kal-El from Krypton, and he grew up to be Superman. Well, he was Superboy, but grew up to be Superman, became a reporter for the, was it the Daily, I'm going to get this wrong, the Daily Planet, I believe it was, for DC. It's either the Daily Planet or Daily Bugle, depending on what universes you are in Marvel or DC. I believe it was the Daily Planet for DC. Became an investigative reporter, mild-mannered Clark Kent, going through the world, reporting on the news, reporting on the tragedies and crises that are happening, but at the same time, donning the red and blue tights and going out and saving the world. Truth, justice, and the American way. Now it's just truth and justice and saving the world, because Superman has become much more than just an American character. He's become a global character. He belongs to the world as far as the modern day writers are concerned. And it's rightfully so. Superman is not just one country, one area, one state. Superman fell to this earth in that story and really should belong to the world, a hero to the world. And that was the idea of that one. And the mythos of Superman is ridiculous. You look through all the different stories and you'd be hard pressed to find a new story for Superman. I think the only stories that have been creative in recent years and creative and enjoyable to read have been the stories that have been written by Brian Michael Bendis, a former Marvel writer who went over to DC, and he's been doing some incredible things from what I've heard. I have not had a chance to read a lot of the run that he's had, but he's been playing with the mythos of Superman. But writers over the years have been trying to find a way to get into the weird world of Superman. There are so many stories written about that character, and it's like, how do you write him after so many decades? How do you write him after so many things that he's been through? He's been killed, he's been brought back, he's been split into two. He's had, he was at one point the last son of Krypton. Then you find out he's got other family members as well. And there's the whole mythology of the House of El and everything else. Doomsday, and Lex Luthor, and you just throw a stone and you could hit a Superman story. And it gets really, really weird. Some of the stories that they've come up with them. Hell, there was the one where you can find it online, just Superman Superman versus Muhammad Ali. And there was a story where through some means they used magic so that Superman can be depowered so he can have some exhibition or charity fight with Muhammad Ali. I've never read that story, but I've always seen that comic book cover and thinking to myself, wow, there's a new way to write Superman in a sense, but it's been so odd for that character to exist. And there's always been the idea of, what if Superman went bad? What if Superman became evil? Now, there is Bizarro Superman, which is the opposite Superman, essentially. It hurts my brain to even try to read an issue of Bizarro Superman because everything he says is backwards. So instead of saying good, he says bad. Instead of saying I am not. And it gets weird. But the Bizarro world was another creation, just another facet of Superman to try to give the readers something to latch onto. Also to give Superman another type of villain, in a sense. Although Bizarro Superman sometimes seems almost childlike in a sense. So it's kind of sad sometimes, some of his stories. Because he means well, but he's misled in a lot of ways. And again, you read any stories with him, and it just, that's another deep dive. And then, was it part 2 or part 3? I can't remember off the top of my head. From the live-action Superman movies from back in the 80s, there was the one where they exposed Superman to a synthetic type of kryptonite. And the idea was that the bad guys... I can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head. Damn it. It was the film where the one businessman makes a deal with the character played by Richard Pryor. And they're trying to find a way to create a kryptonite that would kill Superman. Because they know that Superman is weak to kryptonite. So they try using the skills of Richard Pryor's character to hack computers so they can try to synthesize a version of kryptonite that they could use. But instead of coming up with the green kryptonite that they would expect, he had to substitute an ingredient in the chemical build, or the breakdown, essentially, the ingredients list. And he put in an ingredient from cigarettes because he figured, well, if it's bad for human beings to smoke cigarettes, it's got to be bad for Superman. And I think they created a red kryptonite, which in this case made him angry, or amplified his anger and made him evil. And then you saw Superman go around the world and just wreak havoc. At one point, he's going to what you would think would be helping like an oil tanker from an oil spill. He actually rips it open and lets the oil go all over the place. He makes the Leaning Tower of Pisa. I believe he goes and fixes it, or there was a gag there, I can't remember what it was. I think he straightens it out at first, and then later on in the movie he comes back and puts it back to the way it was naturally leaning. And a bunch of other different things, like he'll blow up the Great Wall of China and everything else. It was a way to play with the idea of what if Superman went bad. And there was that weird scene, which I still don't know if it actually took place in Superman's mind or if it took place in the actual world in which that movie set in that evil Superman goes to a junkyard and has a moment where he splits in two. So he's evil Superman, and then Clark Kent steps out of him wearing the full suit and glasses. So now Clark Kent has to take on the evil version of himself. And it looks like Clark Kent still has the powers of Superman, but they're just trying to give you the idea of, hey, look, it's the good guy versus the bad guy in one person. And that junkyard scene I remember watching as a kid, and I thought to myself, well, that's a weird one. But it always seemed, because everybody clears out from the junkyard when he first lands, that it was something of an internal struggle. And obviously, because it's a Superman movie and he has to take on the bad guys, Clark Kent wins that one, and he's able to defeat the evil, I guess, intentions or evil side of himself. He's able to, rein in that anger, and then he goes out to does what Superman does, and that's save the day. That was a playing around with that idea. As I sat down tonight, earlier, I was watching Brightburn, and it sets up these, like, they jump right into it. You see a couple hanging out. They're trying to have a child, so they're fooling around, and you get the idea that they've tried many times before, and just for whatever reason, they can't have children. The couple that you see are played by Elizabeth Banks and David Denman, and they are playing respectively the characters of Tori Breyer and Kyle Breyer. Something's happening where Tori, I just can't conceive, or Kyle just can't deliver, whatever the case is. But there's, there's a sound that they hear, and then all of a sudden a big crash happens, and they jump right into it, that some kind of phenomenon happened. Crash landed somewhere in the woods not far from the home. They went out there, they found some kind of vessel, and then they found a child. And they took that child home, and they decided to raise it. Because they, in their minds, they're like, oh, look, this is, it's a blessing from the heavens, or, God has delivered, whatever the case was. They thought it was a blessing from the world, a sign that says, hey, look, we've been trying, but finally, this literally fell in our backyard, and we're going to raise him, take care of him, and, it'll be our family. So years go by, and they show a little montage of baby shots and video, and they're raising the child, and they end up naming the little boy Brandon. It becomes a Brandon Breyer. 12 years go by, and everything seems to be going fine, up until on his 12th birthday, there is this weird electronic distortion sound, like a chanting. You don't know what it is, and you find out that they actually have taken that little vessel or ship that they found the baby in. You really don't get a good shot of it until much later in the film, but they've taken that ship and they've locked it up in their barn, and they never told little Brandon about it. But they've been raising this child, and the child so far has acted normal. Like, there's nothing out of the ordinary. He looks and behaves like a child, so there's nothing to be alarmed about, up until this ship somehow calls out to him and activates something in the child. Suddenly the kid realizes something's different about him. Something is not normal, and he's lured to this vessel. So at first they think he's sleepwalking. They find him in the barn, and they realize, oh crap, he's close to the ship. Something's going on. Now, if I haven't said this before, spoilers for this movie, Brightburn. This movie came out last year, and it was supposed to have a big announcement at Comic-Con, I think from last year or the year before. I can't remember off the top of my head. But what I say this is mired in controversy was James Gunn was one of the producers of this film. James Gunn of Guardians of the Galaxy 1 and 2 fame for MCU. He also directed other films like Slither. I'm trying to remember some of the other ones he did. Yeah, I know he comes from the Trauma Film School with Lloyd Kaufman. And what happened was, while Gunn was writing the success of Guardians of the Galaxy 2, and he was going to go prep for Guardians 3, he decided to do this other project and announce it at Comic-Con. But shortly before the announcement at Comic-Con, there was a story where some old tweets that James Gunn had put up on Twitter were rediscovered by a gentleman by the name of, I believe it was Mike Cernovich. Cernovich was a conservative gentleman who decided that he was going to start targeting a lot of different people in Hollywood and go after them for some of the things they might have said in the past or some of their behaviors, and say, hey, look, this is what they've done. Do you people really, love this guy now, or do you believe these people are right? Whatever the case was, Cernovich is a pain in the ass. I only mention this part of the story, or this part of the news or history, because it affected the release in some shape or form. I remember seeing the trailers for Brightburn, and I remember seeing the advertisements, but I do remember that at the time, James Gunn was essentially, he did not appear at Comic-Con. He did not get a chance to put his film out there on as big of a platform as I'm sure he would have liked. The film itself is written by, let's see here, all cast and crew and writers. Brian Gunn and Mark Gunn. So I would imagine they're related in some shape or form, but they were using the name of James Gunn, who was producing it, to help them go through. And since James Gunn has been tied to other comic book films, this seemed right up their alley, essentially. So James Gunn is not only involved with the Guardians of the Galaxy franchise from Marvel, but since his unceremonious parting ways with Disney over the controversy of those old tweets, thanks to Mr. Cernovich, he was a free agent for a little while. And what happened was Warner Brothers decided to call him up and said, hey, look, if you're not going to go over there, how about you come over here and help us do a sequel to The Suicide Squad? Which he said, sure, why not? Now, since all this happened, James Gunn has been able to reunite with Disney, and it seems like Guardians of the Galaxy 3 is a go, but not until he's done with with Suicide Squad, before he does the third Guardians of the Galaxy. So James Gunn's got his plate full, and Brightburn came out, and it kind of went under the radar, at least for me. It seemed kind of weird. Now, I've said in the past that I'm not a big fan of horror films or scary movies, but as I've gotten older, I've gotten more curious when it comes to a certain director's style or cinematography, the breakdowns of different films, the little Easter eggs that you find here and there. So when I was watching Brightburn, I watched it. I knew it was going to be a scary movie, and I'm not going to lie. There was a few times where I cringed or my jaw dropped when I saw some of the horror that was played into it. But when I knew that it was the story of what if Superman turned evil at a young age, I said, "Oh, this seems kind of interesting." So to get back to the story of it, on his 12th birthday, after Brandon realizes that there's something different, his attitude seems to change. And at first they just, chalk it up to, oh, he's hitting puberty. He's at that age, all boys act differently. They're growing up. There is this, how do I put it? He seems like a sociopath. There's no feelings coming from this boy, because now he realizes not only is he different, but he's superior to the people that have raised him and the people that are around him. So he no longer feels like a human child, essentially, because he knows he's starting to discover these different things. At one point, he goes to mow the lawn, and as he's having trouble doing the little ripcord to start the engine, he accidentally flings the damn mower across the field that he's standing in. And when I mean flings it, like he flung it far. But when he finds it, apparently he had started the motor and it landed. It's still running. You see the blades whirring about. And that's when he first gets the inclination of, let me stick my hand into this running mower and see what happens. This was one of the scenes from the trailer. And they show him just shove his hand into this lawnmower, and there's nothing that happens to him. He doesn't get hurt. He doesn't get cut. He looks at his hand in amazement. There's no damage whatsoever, but he looks down at the blade of the lawnmower, and it's bent. He goes, oh, okay, that's something new. So this little boy, I say little, 12 years old, he's realizing that he has certain abilities. So right from the get-go, we'll go through. He learns how to fly. He learns how to shoot lasers out of his eyes, and he's got speed. So with all these different things. Oh, and he also has this weird, whenever he's around, some type of electric distortion happens. So laptops, TVs, radios, something happens where there's like an electric magnetic field that distorts things. It usually is used just to ramp up the tension when he's around and somebody's not realizing they're about to get taken out or a jump scare, whatever the case is. So this boy now starts realizing, oh, okay, I have all these different things. Let me see what I can do. Let me see what happens. One of the first things that happens is one of the girls that he is infatuated with at first She says something really nice to him in class, to encourage him, like, you're pretty smart, and then whatever the case is. He tries to go visit her by, flying outside of her window, like any little boy would do. But she gets creeped out. And the next time she sees him in class, calls him a pervert. So he obviously gets a little upset. He's embarrassed in front of the class because it happens in front of all of his classmates and his gym teacher. And they're doing almost like a trust fall exercise. But when he's supposed to go towards her, she gets freaked out because last thing this little girl remembers is he was flying outside of her window with glowing red eyes. So he was, obviously scared her. She lets him fall. He hits his head. Obviously, it doesn't matter to this little kid because he's essentially a version of Superman. But he's embarrassed because all the class is laughing at him. They're making jokes at his expense. And the gym teacher says, give him a hand, help him up since you let him fall. As she sticks her hand out reluctantly, he grabs it, but in a fit of anger, not only does he crushes it, but like mangles her wrist as well. And he's just like, oh man, that's a little over the top, but okay. And now everybody's upset because this boy heard the girl, and it's a small town, and everybody knows one another, and they, but everybody is in each other's business. The parents start to argue. They start questioning where the boy came from, because everybody knows that the Bryers are not his biological parents. They're the adoptive parents, quote unquote. Nobody knows that they didn't actually adopt him. Nobody knows that he was found in the woods in this weird ship. So the story goes on, and the little boy still is infatuated with the girl, goes to visit her when she's at home recovering. Her hand's all bandaged up, and she says, I'm not supposed to talk to you, and I'm still scared of you. And then he says, well, I'll fix that. So he goes out. Now, this is where the movie gets really interesting, because they show this diner, or this fast food restaurant, and the woman who works at the counter is the little girl's mom. And it's the first piece of horror. Like, the mangling of the girl's wrist and everything else, that was a little creepy and scary. But this one is where they start ramping up the horror a bit, because now he starts going after his victims. Now he realizes, hey, look, nothing can really stop me. And the chanting that he hears that's coming from the ship keeps giving him some kind of foreign language, or some kind of almost like a mantra that's being signaled from the ship. And as the little boy deciphers it, because his brain is not human, so he finally remembers the language, it actually says, take the world. So now he's realizing, I've been sent here to take the world, take over. I'm superior. I will do what I want. Again, what if Superman decided, I'm not going to play by everybody else's rules. I'm stronger and faster than everybody else. He goes out there and he attacks the lady at the fast food restaurant. But there's the one scene where he breaks some of the fluorescent light bulbs in the ceiling, and when she's looking up, one of the pieces of glass jams into her left eye. And this is where you can tell that the makers of this film were having fun playing with some of the horror, some of the body horror in a sense, because this is not the first time you see this type of, not the last time you see this type of horror play on this movie. She tries to pull the piece of glass out of her left eye. And it's a cringe-inducing scene as I'm sitting there watching her. Because at one point, all right, she's staying still. This is CGI, whatever the case is, because they're not going to obviously jam a piece of glass into her eye, not in real life. But the one part of the scene where she's looking down and she's terrified and she's trying to pull this piece out, she suddenly looks up. So, the eyeball actually, both her eyes move up real fast and back down. And as she, you ever have something stuck somewhere, not even, in your body, but when you try to pull, a stick out of the ground, or when you're cutting something with a knife and it gets stuck and you're just trying to pull out, she's trying to wiggle this piece of glass out, and it just becomes what the fuck? Again, I'm not into horror movies, but I found this interesting. She finally pulls it out, but now there's this liquid that comes out of her eye, and obviously she starts to bleed. So the one part that I did like was when they show a shot from her perspective, the right side of the lens is perfectly fine. You can see her surroundings, but the left side is all tinted red, and you can see a reddish drip has come down that side of the lens, trying to recreate what her eyesight would be. And in that red stained area, you can see a figure in the background in the restaurant. Every time she looks around, it continuously moves. It's got some kind of a hood on. You can see the striped shirt. It's the outline of a little boy, the boy Brandon. And as he approaches her, she runs towards the back of the freezer. She tries to lock up the freezer, and she thinks she's safe. The lights are flickering. Whatever he's doing with the electricity, it's causing interference. Finally, he uses his heat vision, and he starts to slice the door in half, and the woman's freaking out. Her eye is still bleeding. She's all cut up from the glass. The door gets ripped off the hinges of the freezer, and as he's standing a good distance away from the door itself, there's this wonderful shot of as she's sitting there terrified. You can see him close the distance so quickly, and the way they show that shot of him just moving so fast across the ground, and then it cuts to black into the next scene. You're like, oh wow, like this little boy is really using the abilities that he's learned so far. And again, you think of Superman using these abilities to go out and raise trains, make it to school, finding joy in these new abilities. But this little boy is like, oh no, fuck this. Taking what he's learned so far, and he's realizing that, nobody can mess with him right now, so he can do whatever he wants. He no longer has to play by anybody else's rules, as opposed to where Superman or a young Clark Kent would have used his abilities and say, hey, look, I can race the local train, I can make it to school, I can fly, and whatever the case is. The new abilities, were a newfound joy, essentially. But this boy, Brandon Breyer, not so much. And the lady from the restaurant goes missing, and that's the first of his victims where he actually takes a life, in a sense, because for the rest of the film, you don't know what happens to her. Later on, he comes across a friend of his father's, and I'm trying to remember some of the other ones. There's a few different people he takes out in horrific fashion, but it all comes down to, and again, because this is a horror movie, it plays with certain tropes. So I remember, or at least I can recall, The Omen, or the second Omen movie. I can't remember off the top of my head which one exactly, but it's the idea of one of the parents will stand by the kid and say, oh, no, it couldn't be our son, it couldn't be our child, I love him so much, he's an angel. And the other parent's just like, oh, no, our son's an animal, something's not right, and he's not normal. And at one point, the parents argue, saying, hey, look, we found him in the woods, we should have told somebody back then, now it's on us, what are we going to do about it now? And Elizabeth Banks, she's trying to stand by her child, she wants to make sure that Brandon's okay, and is not believing what's being told to her. I'm not going to go into the other parts of the movie. I think I got about halfway into the film as far as telling you what actually happens. I was watching it knowing a pretty good idea of what was going to play out in the film. What really caught me off guard were some of the moments of horror. Again, I was not expecting some of the different points, but they were cringe-inducing, and again, I'm a bit squeamish for horror movies at times. I will say that some of the effects were not practical, which kind of distracted in a sense. I've come to appreciate older horror movies where they use the practical effects to show, somebody losing a limb, or somebody getting shot, or somebody being beheaded, whatever the case is. Whenever you could use practical effects and get your point across, fantastic. Nowadays with CGI, certain things looked fine. There was another scene where a guy loses a jaw. And I can easily say that I let a little oh my god escape from myself as I jumped back a little bit. I was like, I was not expecting that one. But they do a good job in showing the different aspects of what a young child with the abilities of Superman could do. I really wish this movie got a little bit more attention when it was released. It just seemed really weird. Actually, you know what? I have not even looked this up yet. It was released May 24th of 2019. So last year. Kind of a weird time to release, as far as I'm concerned. You would imagine that a movie like this, you would probably release it closer to the fall. Again, with the season of Halloween and everything, or the holiday. You would think that would be more up their alley, but it seemed like they wanted to have a fun time and put it out, I guess, along with the summer movies. But that's a time that can be easily swallowed up by bigger name movies, and it's kind of hard to struggle for that market share. So let's see here. Budget was estimated about $6 million, it says. Again, if you look at movies, you always have to keep in mind what it takes to advertise it or promote it. So probably closer to 12. Opening weekend, 7.8 million domestic. Not bad. Okay. Gross 17.3 domestic overall. Okay. And worldwide 32.8. Okay. Not bad. Most movies, they want to double their investment. So if you're looking at 12, 24 would be their mark. And they made 32. So add another, 24, 32, another 8 million on top of that. Not bad. I'm not sure if this is the kind of movie you could sequelize, though. This was really interesting. Oh, I do have to mention, during the end credits, there was a really cool thing, because this is, by the Gunn clan, I guess, essentially. They had a few actors that you would recognize from other movies, again, Slither, the Guardians movies. I'm trying to remember some of the other James Gunn movies, and I'm blanking completely. Regardless, at the end of the movie, there is a scene that plays out during the credits, and you see a lot of natural disasters that are happening that are now attributed to Brendan Breyer. They don't know his name at this point. He's just some weird figure that floats in the sky, or he leaves these weird markings out in the crops, or in the field by burning down crops. Michael Rooker, who played Yondu in Guardians of the Galaxy, I don't remember his name for his character from Slither. He plays a online conspiracy theory video host. Think of like Alex Jones in a sense, but not as much of a blowhard in this sense. He's trying to tell, the mainstream media is lying to us and they're covering it up once again. There's this, video of this and that, and they're showing all the different footage. And then this is the interesting part, because it's essentially an evil take on a comic book character. And he mentions, what about the half man, half sea creature thing that they found in the ocean that's capsizing boats? What about the woman who strangles people with cords and ropes? And then when they show these images, they're like fan art essentially of crudely drawn characters, what he's talking about essentially is a half man, half sea creature. He's talking about an evil version of Aquaman. When he talks about the woman that strangles people with ropes or electrical cords, he's talking about an evil version of Wonder Woman. They also show a quick shot of something that looks like an Area 51 alien with a cape, which is a call out to the Martian Manhunter, it seems like. And then they also does, that was the other movie, Superhero, I think it was, or Hero, was another James Gunn movie with Rainn Wilson and I'm blanking on the other girl's name. But essentially, what happens if a superhero was trying to be in, what happens if a real life superhero happened in, our world essentially, and the graphic violence that would occur with that one. That was a movie that was shown to me by Jimmy, and I gotta say, again, James Gunn did an amazing job with that one. But they show the shot of the Crimson Bolt from that movie. So the Crimson Bolt kind of sort of is a Batman character in a sense, and it just had this amalgamation of, look, if we have an evil Superman, what if this reality had an evil version of the Justice League, essentially? Not to say they're going to come together and team up, but that would be the scary part. What if they all came together and said, hey, look, we're just going to wreck the world? It seemed like a really, really weird take on the character, but it poses that what if question. And I enjoyed it. I was actually quite surprised. Again, just the style and the way that the film was shot, and the different call-outs to the character itself. They had everything there. I mean, when you think of Superman, you think of the baby that crash landed on Earth and grew up in a small town farm area and went on to do great things. Well, that's just the opposite here. Little baby crash lands on a farmland, a small town, and when he realizes that, I don't have to listen to anybody. I don't have to play by the rules. I'm going to do whatever the fuck I want. Brandon Breyer goes around. One of the things that happens throughout this film is he starts drawing this weird sigil where it looks like a B back to back. So one's inverted a little bit, and it's got like a long tail at the bottom. So when they find it at the first crime scene, they find it at a second crime scene, and then they find that the boy had been drawing that over and over again. I'm assuming Brandon Breyer, or for Brightburn, as the movie is called, it was a sigil or a symbol for that, much like how Superman has the large S on his chest. That was another thing that was shown, because at the very end, when they show the big burn sigil out in the farmland, you're like, oh, okay, like he's not holding back at all. He's letting people know that he's out there. They show a shot of him above a forest fire. They see a figure lingering in the sky. They show a building that's, crumbling and supposedly exploded from the inside. He's flying above. It gets really weird, because it's almost like a found footage or news footage kind of thing. So the clip at the end of it does a good job of giving you that hopelessness that this little boy is out there and doing a bunch of things. Again, I'm not trying to spoil the movie itself, but if you've put two and two together at this point, the boy survives the end of the movie. I will not tell you what happens at the end of the movie, because it's worth a watch. Again, it plays on a lot of different tropes from horror movies. So you get the jump scares, you get the loud scenes from time to time, but the gore, even though it happens far and few between, it's there. And when it does happen, you're like, oh shit, that character's not surviving. One of the ones that happens that really was like, oh wow, they really did that. One of the characters comes up and is trying to help the family, and then Brandon just swoops down and like tackles him, but at a high speed while he's flying, and all that's left is blood splatter everywhere. Like, oh shit. Okay, I guess that's what would happen if Superman just came down and had no regard whatsoever for somebody else's safety, and just wanted to come down and just annihilate them. Essentially, just they would explode like a blood bag. And I was like, wow, they went crazy with this one. They really gave you that what if scenario. What if Superman just had no moral compass and just decided, I'm gonna run shit, and goes from there. And how that story would play out after the fact. Another thing that I would mention is, this is a short movie. I was surprised at how short it was. Hour and a half. And I know horror movies, sometimes it's a little hard to really, how do I put this? The longer a movie plays out, the more of the weaknesses are shown. Again, I'm going to make this an analogy to wrestling. A wrestler who is a big bruiser, all muscle, no skill. He comes out, a Goldberg, if you will. Goldberg, who came out for 2-3 minute matches when at the height of his popularity. The longer he stayed in the ring, the more time he realized, oh, he doesn't actually know any wrestling moves. He can't actually technically wrestle somebody because of the lack of skill. He's just, 4 or 5 moves and that's it. I would imagine that's going to be the same for horror movies, where the longer the story plays out, the more you feel it loses its effect. So that's the only reason I could see as to why this movie didn't go longer than an hour and a half. They could have played certain scenes out further. They could have stretched out the, what's happening in town, whatever the case is, but they really jumped right into it. And they got to the conclusion to the point where you're like, oh wow, fuck. So I enjoyed it. If you get a chance, I watched it off of Star Streaming. I don't know if it's available on anything else, but if you want to rent it, if you want to check it out, I recommend it a lot. Compare that to my experience watching Men in Black International. I know they're 2 different types of movies, but Men in Black was like a 2-hour and change movie. By the time I got to the end of that movie and I was able to figure out the story, I was like, whatever. I really was not impressed. After watching Thor Ragnarok and seeing the chemistry between Chris Hemsworth and Tessa Thompson, I was hoping that was going to, translate to Men in Black. It did not, apparently. And it's through no fault of their own. It's just the movie was just not that great. Brightburn, on the other hand, for a horror movie, yes, I'm a pussy when it comes to horror movies. I freely admit that. But the story was simple enough. What if Superman turned evil at an early age? That hooked me because I'm a comic book fan, so automatically you've got my attention. And the way it plays out, again, predictable in certain areas, the tropes are there, but you're like, fuck, man, they played with this idea. They really wanted to see what they could pull off and what they can come up with. And to James Gunn and all his team and crew and the director, just an amazing job. Elizabeth Banks is always a delight to see on screen. I don't think I've seen many movies that I did not enjoy with her in it. David Denman, who played the husband, did a great job, especially when he gets a little paranoid. It's very interesting to see. And the kid who played Brandon Breyer, Jackson Dunn, he plays the character of Brandon so well. Like, at first you see him, he's a normal kid, everything's going fine. But then at one point they tell him that somebody, one of the family members or family friends have passed away. And he just continues carrying on his scene like nothing's affecting him. And at one point he says, "Are you expecting me to cry? Do you want me to be sad?" But he says it with no emotion. And it's just like, oh fuck, like, this kid's gone, off the deep end. It's no longer Brandon that you knew as a child. It's not the same kid that was in the baby videos, in the montage in the beginning of the film. This kid has finally said, fuck this, I don't care. But, so, if you get a chance to watch this one, I recommend it. I'm going to try to see what else I can find online, and hopefully I can get a few different films knocked off my list from 2019, because really, I just wanted to catch up, in a sense, on a few different things. So I figured this is a good time. Try to find a few films here and there. Again, and when I first started recording again, I was trying to find different streaming apps or movie apps, or excuse me, services that I could use, that hopefully I would find some stuff that would be entertaining to watch. Again, for anybody who's wondering, I do have a movie on in the background right now, because this is what I'm doing essentially late at night, and just watching films again. I'm watching American Gangster with Denzel Washington and Russell Crowe, I believe. Yes, Russell Crowe was the other one. Just to watch something different, because I can't watch superhero movies all the time. It gets kind of boring after a while. But getting a chance to watch that, a crime drama play out, that's always fun. But I'm going to see if I can find, I don't know, maybe another horror movie. Maybe. We'll see. Again, I'm not the biggest fan of them. I know that I had not watched... Doug and I had talked about it in the past. The big film franchises when it comes to horror films. Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street. There was a remake of Friday the 13th some time ago, and then they did a Nightmare on Elm Street a little bit more recent. And I've been curious to check those out and see how those play out and how I hold up against them. When I was a child and my brother were watching these films growing up as teenagers, those movies scared the crap out of me. I probably had nightmares for years on end. Probably the reason why I was always afraid of the dark, or going into the basement by myself, that kind of thing. So I survived. I've gotten better. I'm not as afraid. I can handle certain situations nowadays, so it's gotten better. And I've gotten more curious for these kind of films now, so I can actually sit there and say, let's see what happens with this, or let's see what happens with that. And we'll see. I don't know if I'm going to keep talking about movies and TV shows. I know we're locked up in our places for a while, unless you're, if you are able to go out to work, you're still able to go out and have somewhat of a regular day. But even when you get back home, let's face it, everybody's going to be feeling the effects of this. So try to find something that you can do to not so much take up your time, or just do something that'll entertain you, or something that'll educate you in a sense. In my case, I like watching movies. I like watching films that I didn't get a chance to catch for this past year. I figured that would be one good way to do things. I'm trying to do a few other things on the side here and there. Well, here you go. This is something that I'm not sure if I ever mentioned on air. Last year, somewhere around the summertime, I finally took a dive and found a voiceover coach. And I figured, what the hell? Let's see if I can go through a few classes and see what the decision was, like what the guy see in me as far as an evaluation. And I was given a pretty good evaluation. The guy says, look, you can probably do this. I see there's potential. And I know everybody's gonna say, well, potential just means, blah blah blah. The guy said he saw potential, and he was being flat out honest with me. He goes, look, I can sit here and tell you that, hey, you can book some more classes and I can make you better. He goes, but I'm not going to tell you that. I'm going to tell you, set up, work on your setup at home, practice, and send me some stuff in, and we'll see where you get from there. And the idea is to eventually, hopefully, record a demo of sorts and shop it around so that maybe I can do some work. I don't know if you enjoy listening to my voice. I know sometimes it sounds good. Sometimes I feel like it sounds horrible. That's just me. But a lot of people have told me over the years that, hey, look, you've got a decent sounding voice. You should probably do something in radio, or you should try to do some kind of voiceover stuff. And for, oh God, how long now? Probably 10 to 15 years now. For as long as I've been doing the podcast, really, that's how long it's been. I've been interested in it. I've been looking at different avenues. I've bought equipment over the years. I've tried toying around a few things. Jimmy helped me out with trying to send in a voice sample for audiobook recording. I've looked into different things and different projects. I've helped friends out with recording some things. One of the projects that I worked on was for our friend Esmeralda. She needed somebody to do a strong bad voice intro for her act. And I said, yeah, sure, why not? So I did her a favor, and I did my best version of Strong Bad from homestarrunner.com. And I was nervous when I first, sent it over. I'm like, I stayed up tried to do my best to record it and try to see what came of it. From what I heard and from what she told me was that everybody loved it when it played out at the event where she was using it. People actually asked her if she had actually reached out to the guys that do the cartoon to do the intro for her. And she said, no, a friend of mine did it for me. To which I was flattered to think that somebody out there thought, hey, look, that actually sounds like the real Strong Bad. Leave it to the Spanish guy to do a, Spanish cartoon. But it worked in that respect. So I've had little victories here and there over the years as far as doing voiceover stuff. Nothing that would make me a paid professional. Let's put it that way. I've always said that I would love if this turned into some type of paying work or job as far as doing the podcast. I don't foresee that happening. I'll be flat out honest with you. I've had a few friends tell me at this point that, hey, you should start a Patreon. Hey, you should try this. You should do advertisements and everything else. The idea of advertisements is okay. I don't think I get the numbers these days for that. I don't think I qualify in that respect. Reading ads, I don't want to sit here and read an ad for like investing or car insurance, stuff like that. Like I just feels bleh. It's the best way I can put it. But the idea of trying to monetize this in some shape or form, I don't know, maybe on YouTube, if enough people start watching it, maybe I'll hit the monetize button. I don't know. I don't ever want to charge for this. This is just me rambling at this point, especially before it was me rambling alongside with Doug and, other previous hosts and friends who have been on the show with me. Maybe that's what makes this kind of like a fruitless endeavor in a sense. I love doing this. It's a labor of love, but I don't see any point in trying to really make this section of it financially rewarding, because that's not what I got into do this for. Voiceover, different story. If somebody's going to hire me to read some lines for a cartoon, a movie, or some kind of narration, sure, why not? I'll see what happens. And who knows, maybe I'll update you guys on that one. But that's another thing that I've been doing over the past several months, trying to practice, trying to get some things done. My coach, who gave me a treasure trove of material, there's a bunch of different things, cartoons, video game characters, commercial reads, stuff like that. And some of the information he gave me is promising, but you got to put the work in. So that's another thing that I'm trying to put on my plate, because who knows, if I can do that and I can have some fun, and especially what's happening nowadays, if I can upgrade my setup here to the point where I can actually be comfortable with it and have this where I could record a file and send it out, I think it'd be great. I think it'd be a lot of fun. So we'll see what happens, because that might benefit here. That might help things out in terms of the setup, the recording space, and things of that nature, and we'll see what happens. So we'll see. Maybe I'll update you guys on that as things come along and things play out. I'm not sure just yet. I would love to go out and do some more stuff and get together with people of like-minded ideas and see what happens from there. I don't know. And then again, I've always, going to try to look out in a way to hopefully get back to talking to other people as well. Because there's only so many movies I can watch. There's only so many TV shows I can stream. And things are going to get busy around here in terms of having another child. So I will do my best to keep this rolling. I will do my best to keep people updated on certain stuff. Again, I'm kind of a personal guy, so private guy in that respect, with the personal stuff. So I don't think everything is going to be laid out for everybody to hear. If you know me in real life and you're curious of what's going on, reach out to me. You just send me a text message. Let me know what's going on. I've been trying to reach out to a few people here and there that I know of, I've had certain problems and want to make sure that they're okay. But it gets busy sometimes, and sometimes you lose track of friends, lose track of people, and it sucks when you go a long time without talking to, especially people who are really close or trusted friends. Again, make sure that we're reaching out and keeping track of everybody, and hopefully everybody's doing all right. So that's about it. If you're going to watch movies, as far as this episode's concerned, Men in Black International, it's a fun film. Not as fun as I thought it was going to be, as you can tell, because I really didn't get too much into it as far as talking about the film itself. If you want to watch Men in Black International, I would recommend Thor Ragnarok. It's a much better movie from those two, in respect to Chris Hemsworth and Tessa Thompson. And then Brightburn from James Gunn, the Gunn family, I'm assuming, because they all have Gunn in their names and they all spell it the same way. And the stars from the movie. Let's go through it again just to make sure that I'm not going through. Oh, really? Here we go. I have to go open my tablet and it had to reload. Elizabeth Banks, David Denman. Denman. I can't say this guy's name. I'm sorry, sir. David Denman, and Jackson Dunn, who do a fantastic job of playing the main characters in this film. I think that's the other thing about this film that I kind of enjoyed. It has a certain claustrophobic feeling to it because they're in a small town out in Kansas. Maybe that also is another thing. I didn't even think about that until just now. But they do a phenomenal job. The movie came out last year in May 2019, and I had a fun time watching it. I would recommend it to anybody else out there who's looking for something to watch late night, and especially if you're a horror fan. It's a fun little run through, and what if Superman became a bad guy. So, all right, well, that's it for me. I hope everybody else out there is having fun. Stay safe, take care of one another, and again, if you made it this far, thank you for listening. We are the Rabblecast.